Sekeresandprice for Thursday, September 19th, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee, here at the historic Wall Center, where you can extend your game night with a staycation downtown Vancouver. Book a Sekeresandprice exclusive rate at the Wall Center. Call the hotel, 604-331-1000. Tell them Sekeresandprice sent you. Some blackout dates supply based on availability. Matt Sekeres with Blake Price. Four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson hitting switches, conducting things. Big show on a very newsy day for the Vancouver Canucks as they open training camp in Penticton, British Columbia at the South Okanagan Events Center. Our poll question today, will you worry about Thatcher Demko's health all season? Yes or no? You can vote at the X and YouTube, at our X and YouTube channels. Blake Price. How are you?
How's it going? I'm good.
How is Salt Lake City treating you?
Pretty well. Yeah. It's been a little bit warmer than Vancouver, I think, so that's kind of nice.
Did you go out for a post-game beer after the match last night?
An old-fashioned. I had an old-fashioned.
Ah, okay. Did you have to get a license from the state of Utah to be able to?
No,
okay. No. Did they no longer do that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, you do have to provide a passport, though.
Okay.
I tried to use my Nexus card last time I was in Salt Lake, and they said that doesn't work. And I said, I can get into your country, but I can't get into your bar.
Exactly.
And he said, yep.
I made one business trip to Salt Lake years ago for a basketball game, sat down at the hotel bar after I was finished my afternoon work, ordered lunch with a beer. She said, I'll need your ID. I said, no problem. And then she passed me like a waiver or something. And I was like, what's this? She's like, everybody who orders an alcoholic drink in this state must complete this form.
Oh, I think they've done away with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Been a long time.
Yeah.
So on the poll question, given his injury history, I will worry about Thatcher Demko's health for each and every day that he has left as a Vancouver Canuck. It is a resounding yes from me, particularly after what we heard this morning. You?
I think that's the only answer. I mean, you're putting your head in the sand. Otherwise, I mean, he's got an injury history now. And he's got, as we're about to hear, he's got a very, unspecified kind of injury right now, rare enough injury that, you don't even know how this is going to heal necessarily. There's not a lot of empirical evidence on where this goes from here. So for that, it has to be a yes answer from me as well.
And our top story today is Thatcher Demko speaking at the South Okanagan Events Center. He provides no timeline for his return to the Vancouver Canucks crease. He was doing some drills this morning. In fact, even got down into a butterfly at one point. But Canucks brass deferred to Demko yesterday when they met the media. So let's hear from the Canucks goaltender as he updates his health.
Definitely been a little bit frustrating at times. I think, when I first injured myself in the playoffs there's such a rare case, such a unique injury that we didn't really have a lot of, readily available research or case studies or really any information to have a concrete timeline. And, we were told that this might be a situation that we might find ourselves in, the one that we're in right now. And, I've been able to rehab a ton this summer, and sure, it's taken a little bit longer than obviously I would have liked, but especially the last couple weeks on the ice, I've been feeling a lot better, and there's definitely some light at the end of the tunnel for me now, and full confidence that I'll be back out there.
That one seems optimistic. That one seems positive. That answer, light at the end of the tunnel. The last little bit being better, but as we're about to hear, not all of it is just sunshine and roses. So. Again, listening to that, it sounds like he's headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, he is, although not a lot of precedent. Knew that longer rehab was a possibility. The light at the end of the tunnel part is great. He gets into further detail. Let's hear about the unique nature of this injury.
There's not one case that we can find, goaltender or hockey player in general. It's been wild. It's been part of the frustration is just not having a ton of information, and you're kind of just going into it blindfolded, and it can be scary at times. And I think we've done a good job handling that as a group with the medical staff and the organization, and doing the best we can in that front. but yeah, we haven't found a single hockey player. We've found, maybe less than 5 soccer guys, just random things like that. It's not too concrete.
Do you kind of become the case study in that?
I guess so, yeah. I guess I'm leading the charge for the next guy that has something like this happen. I can help him out. So.
Well, I got to say, his spirits being good is a nice sign. I think a welcoming sign, a comforting sign. Because when he, the first tweet or the first clip, and you're right. I mean, it ends with light at the end of the tunnel, so it sounds optimistic. That one where he uses words like wild and blindfolded and scary, and never seen this injury before in hockey. That one, needless to say, is chock full of concern. I got to say, though, I was, and Jeff sent a note from Penticton where he's covering things. This is the best that Thatcher has been with media in a long time.
Oh,
this was incredibly professional. This was incredibly thorough. This was incredibly detailed. I absolutely love this next clip that we're going to play. You'll remember that yesterday when Alvin deferred all comment on this to Demko, he talked about the privacy for the players. And I did wonder at the time whether Rick Tocchet downplaying Elias Pettersson's knee ailment last year, or the end of last season, as tendinitis shot a little bit of a chill through the dressing room that, okay, let's not leave this up to the head coach to characterize the injury. Let's meet with the media ourselves and detail what's there, because, it's our body, it's our career, it's our feelings, our, what we're undergoing. So let's let them hear it from the horse's mouth. And that's what Thatcher Demko had to say when he took the podium today on clearing the air. Take a listen.
I'm a grown man. I feel like, you guys have been kept in the dark all summer, and, obviously I'm not at training camp, and I'm sure that you guys probably see that as a big deal. It is a big deal. I'd love to be out there. And I just felt that, to respect to you guys, I'd like to address you directly. And, I don't want there to be any mixed messaging or, Talk's telling you guys one thing and Patrick's telling you another. We're all on the same page. Everyone's up to date. I talk with them frequently, giving them updates, and they talk to the medical staff every day. So I just felt like it was important for me to address you guys directly.
And they do talk to the medical staff every day. There's no doubt about that. But no one's getting more in depth, more in the weeds on the injury than the player, because the player wants to understand exactly what's going on with his own body. So as much as there are updates for the management staff and for coach, I don't think it's going to be as detailed or in depth as what Thatcher Demko is giving. So if Thatcher Demko feels comfortable talking about the injury, and he clearly is, he's far better source for what's actually happening than the coach or the general manager. So going back to what you said before, absolutely. This is he's been standoffish at times, his Thatcher Demko, and I hope he gets reinforced here that a little bit of transparency, and he wasn't fully transparent, and I don't begrudge him.
Well, I don't think he knows in some cases. Yeah.
And so I don't begrudge him whatever little fences he's left up. That's fine. That was enough. I think you owe it to the fans to let them in the door just a little bit. We don't need to see your medical records, but I think you need to let them in the door a little bit. And he did enough today. And I hope he gets reinforced that that's the way to go in the future, too.
Yeah. As for that second procedure, or a procedure on the second injury,
an unrelated
distinction. Yeah. He talked about how it was unrelated, that they noticed it during the rehab of the first injury. Good to hear that it was, quote, very minor, and that it was only a 2-week recovery. So he should be through that. It's the other stuff now. And, this one might be the most raw, the most honest answer he gave when people circled back and asked him about, hey, what was your playoff readiness for last year?
Yeah, I would say it hasn't been quite linear, obviously. I think looking back as a competitor, I think you kind of lie to yourself in a playoff situation, and I thought maybe I was a little bit farther ahead than I was, in hindsight. I do think that I would have been in a situation where I probably would have been able to kind of grit through it and maybe get out there and play in the conference final there. I'll say that I did hit a bit of a wall in the summer as far as the recovery went, and we did see a little bit of a lack of progress there for a couple months, and obviously that's why I'm in the situation that I'm in right now. But I would say, like I said, the last probably 2 or 3 weeks we've seen a ton of progress, and we're very confident in where I am right now and happy with that.
And he's absolutely right. Players do lie to themselves, particularly in the playoffs, about their availability, how they're feeling, how
they're also willing to gamble. Matt.
They're also willing to gamble. He's right about it not being linear. And wow, that you hit a wall for 2 months in the summer. Yeah, that explains why this has drifted into training camp, despite belief and even comments from Patrick Allvin earlier in the summer that he would be ready to go for this season. One other big topic with regards to the Canucks goaltending was, of course, the demotion of Ian Clark from the director of goaltending to a role where he'll be helping out with the goaltenders and scouting goaltenders, but he is not the goaltender coach anymore. That's Marco Terranius. We know that Thatcher Demko and Ian Clark had a very close relationship. We know that Thatcher Demko has flourished under the tutelage of Ian Clark. It was a bit of a strange move at the behest of Canucks management, Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin, not to just carry on with the status quo, even if Clark had himself injuries that would prevent him from getting on the ice on a daily basis. That could have very easily been the structure this year. And for many believe that's what Ian Clark envisioned when he reported to him that, look, he might not be able to get on the ice like he had in the past. Instead, Canucks brass took that as reason to change the goaltender coach, diminish Clark's role, and this is the first time that we've been able to talk to Thatcher Demko about it. Here's what he had to say.
It was a tricky situation this summer, a little bit delicate at times, and I wasn't really too sure what was going on. I had heard rumblings about maybe a change being made. So yeah, I mean, it's a relationship that Ian and I have cultivated over the years, and it's obviously an important one to me, and we obviously have a ton of respect for one another, and he's not completely out of the picture. We're still keeping in touch, and I'm sure he'll be involved in the rehab process, maybe from a distance, but involved nonetheless. And I didn't know Marco too well coming into this year, but right away when we were made aware about the change being made, Marco's made a great effort to get to know me, and likewise for me towards him. And we've had a great few weeks here getting to know each other. And now that I'm kind of back on the ice and I'm, a more, aggressive capacity, he's been much more involved, and it's been fantastic so far. And I, look forward to continue to work with him.
And he was out on the ice. Marco Terranius was today taking shots on Thatcher Demko, and you can hear that he was caught in the crossfire here, Matt.
Very much.
Just in case we were wondering, how broken up is Thatcher Demko about it? It sounds like he was a little bit broken up about this.
Tricky, delicate. Talked about the relationship cultivated. There's, in one sense, that could be the scariest answer that he gave, right? Because if things go poorly this year for Thatcher Demko, or if he doesn't live up to the great year that he had last year as the Vezina Trophy runner-up, there's an easy scapegoat, right? Well, you changed goaltender coaches on me. You've asked me to change my routine, as Jim Rutherford did earlier this summer, that he's got to work less, maybe be a little fresher for the games, not put in as much work before or after practice, days off, and things like that. And you changed up the tutors. So the Canucks are playing a bit of a high wire act here in terms of the way that they're handling this player and the way that they're handling his tutelage. And you hope for his sake, for the team's sake, that he's healthy enough to play in the October 8th season opener. I mean, getting some preseason games in, or at least a preseason game in, would be outstanding. But barring that he's able to go and inform come October 8th, because, of course, one of the one of the big reasons why the Vancouver Canucks had such an outstanding season last year is that they were ready to go from the jump. Tocchet had talked about how so many players needed big summers, right? That they asked the players to come back a little bit early, commit to each other, be ready to be shot out of a cannon for the opener and not sort of, ease your way around your way into the regular season. They bulked a bunch of points. They gained confidence. It turned out they were a great front runner, and they put forth a spectacular first half of the season where they were right there at the top of the NHL standings, and that allowed for some margin of error in the second half, where they didn't play as well, but still managed to win the division and be the second seed in the Western Conference. So big stakes this year with everybody from Rutherford, Alvin, Tocchet talking about, hey, the hard part isn't done yet. In fact, it gets harder from here because you're a marked team. People realize that you're no longer a pushover. Don't take you.
And that puts a lot of pressure on the other two goalies right now. And those guys came out in the for the second session, Yuri Patera and Artur Shilovs. And now there's going to be, a microscope over their performance, over Artur Shilovs' injury to see if there's any carryover there, because you talked about, Tocchet wanting to see an extra effort last summer. Well, that carried over, I'm sure, in the brains of a lot of players, and maybe Artur Shilov prepared a little too hard for this coming season, wanted to be Tocchet ready, and of course he inflames an injury there. So,
especially since Shilovs apparently didn't have the greatest summer last year. That's one of the reasons why Casey DeSmith was traded for, is they weren't
the pendulum swung the other way.
Yeah, exactly. They weren't entirely impressed with the work that Shilovs did after making his NHL debut the previous season. So a huge camp and preseason here for Patera and for Shilovs, because, well, in Shilovs' case, I think he probably has the confidence of the group after what he did in the postseason, but they got to believe in Patera as well. And needless to say, I think the coaching staff and management needs to see it from Shilovs again this year after fighting a little bit of a knee over the course.
So let me ask you this: after hearing him speak, do you get any further hint if the Vancouver Canucks need to go and get another goaltender? Is Dylan Ferguson going to be the insurance policy? Is that the extent? Do you feel comfortable, if you're a Canucks fan, having Dylan Ferguson as the insurance policy? After what you heard?
So what I would say is I do have some time here and the ability to call more information with how Shilovs, Patera, Ferguson, Tolopilo look. But if you need an answer in the right here and the right now, Blake, there is so much at stake this season. You've got 2 more years of Thatcher Demko. You've got 3 more years of Quinn Hughes, that I would still feel better if they went out, secured the crease, and signed Kevin Lankinen. Because at that point, I think you can feel very good about the fact you've got a bona fide NHL goaltender in Lankinen who has had success. You have Shilovs in a reserve role or in a 1A, 1B role if Demko has to miss time. And look, if Shilovs has to continue playing in the AHL where he gets the bulk of the starts, that's not a bad thing either. I realize that puts you into LTIR, but Blake, I think I saw Quadrelli writing about this at Canucks Army, or tweeting about this. To me, LTIR is not a question of if, it's a question of when. I think you're going to have to meet your maker on LTIR here eventually, anyways.
For sure. But
so
of course,
I'm not.
Cap space increases though, right?
Yeah, but I'm not too. Yeah, see, I'm not too. I'm not too concerned about having to get there earlier than best case scenario. Particularly if it means securing the one position that can lose you games, no matter how good the other 18 guys play. Right?
For sure. But it's still a gamble, and it's not necessarily just about getting into LTIR, Matt. It's about, because you can only, it's not limitless in LTIR. So the $2 million, the $1.7 million that you're giving Kevin Lankinen is $1.7 million you can't give somebody else. So if you think you get Thatcher Demko back on October the 25th, My goodness, that seems like a wasteful use of that 1.7.
And I would argue that it is a bigger gamble to have the questions in goal that you have than to go deeper or earlier into LTIR. For the most part, this management group proved last year and in previous years that they can manage the cap. I understand a second pair right side defenseman is probably going to be needed between now and the trade deadline. But the other thing, Blake, you could have a long-term injury to another player and suddenly you have more cap space as the season goes along, right? So I'm biting the bullet on LTIR. I'm securing the crease, and because that's the immediate concern, right? And I'm letting the season play out. There's all sorts of things that can happen. Right? Like last year they had 4.25 invested in Ilya Mikheyev, and it was clear that his 4.25 wasn't doing much. Last year they had money invested in Beauvillier. They found a way to get rid of him to be able to facilitate the acquisition of Nikita Zadorov and then Elias Lindholm. So yeah, I recognize that's suboptimal. I recognize that makes it more difficult on the manager. I recognize that probably takes you out of the hunting of the big money guys like Jake Gensel, where you fell short last year. But for me, job number one is to win games in the here and now and to make sure that the team is best positioned to win those games rather than casting an eye down to the trade deadline in March and going, no, we want to make sure that we have as much space possible in the buildup to trade deadline. So much can happen between now and then. The right now, where you have the most information, is that you are soft in goal if your two starters or your two goalies are Shelovs as starter and Patera as backup. That would keep me up at night. Not having LTIR space in March or not having cap space in March because of your LTIR situation would cost me far fewer Z's than what you're looking at right now.
I'm convinced they need to add a defenseman at some point this season, and I want absolutely every bit of cap space. If Artur Shelovs is good enough to win you at least half the games during the hardest part of the season against a Stanley Cup finalist in the Oilers, if he can win you half the games, then he can win half of the games that he plays in October, I would think, if not more. And that's all you need to keep your season alive and keep that space available. So I think I'm still willing to gamble here and avoid Kevin Lankin. Kevin Lankin is objectively solidifying the crease if he comes. But I think it's at a cost I'm willing to gamble on over again. If he's on the ice right now. Yeah. Demko's on the ice right now. So we're like the best bit of news today is not so much what Demko said. We saw him on the ice going down in the butterfly, stopping pucks.
Right. And Blake, if they have more information than what Thatcher Demko provided today, then I may well be in agreement with you. But when I'm told there's no timeline, there's an unknown timeline on this,
for sure.
To me, I had a general manager teach me years ago, my job is to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And so for me, preparing for the worst means preparing for Thatcher Demko, not just missing games off the start of the regular season, Blake, but the potential that Thatcher Demko would have to miss games as the season goes along.
Yep.
Let's remember, we're not just talking October here.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to get through 6 months and something in the order of 55 to 60 starts. That's a long time. That's a big workload. So for me, the prudent thing to do would be to go out, sign Lankinen, bite the bullet on LTIR, and make sure you're as good as you can possibly be in the crease. They made this move last year with DeSmith. The entirety of the market, all of us were talking about. Shelovs is showing that he can be an NHL backup. And he came to camp and they went not so fast. Let's go get a guy that we know. Let's go get a guy that we think is better. Let's go get a guy that gives us a better comfort level about where we are in goal than this kid. To me, it's not too dissimilar, the position they're in right now in terms of needing more reliability from the number 2 goaltender or from the tandem of goaltenders that you're going to have available to you.
Comments on YouTube. Jack says Lankinen never been a starter. He hasn't, and that would be interesting too if you had to hand the reins over. We've seen this with other capable backups. The minute they become a starter for 3 to 5 to 7 weeks, of course, it changes, right? The pressure becomes real there.
Now,
Angelo,
what I would say is, I mean, Lankinen started 37 games in Chicago one year. He was stealing some starts away from UC Saros at the beginning of last year, and of course, he doesn't have to be the unquestioned starter with the starter workload. You know, it could be a 1A, 1B thing, which she loves. Whoever's going to give you the best chance to win that night, whoever's got the hot hand.
And Angelo, Demko is Corey Schneider 2.0. Time to trade Demko.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. Like, that's the other thing that has to be put into this equation. It's not like Demko has been a workhorse over his career. He played 32 games the previous year, missed months.
Mm-hmm.
His highest total is 64 the previous year. So I think you have to put that into the stew here of your decision-making and go, well, you know, it's not just about October and when he comes back and plays his first game. It's the 6 months and however many starts that we hope he makes this year. But it's also, what has he shown us to this date to prove that he can be that guy, and by the by, be ready to play every second night in the intensity of the Stanley Cup playoffs, where you're potentially looking at games that go 4, 5, 6 periods long if you get into overtime scenarios,
and
right?
The guy back to Boston for Kevin Swayman. I'm joking. Relax, Canucks fans. Relax.
BC, not BU.
BC, pardon me. Yes.
Sorry.
Easy nose.
Yeah, no, we corrected in the here and now. Okay. Let's go on to Elias Pettersson, whom we haven't heard from as of yet, but will shortly. He did speak to Ian McIntyre Sportsnet, and Pettersson acknowledged that he still feels something with his knee sometimes, but that it's better than last season. He mentions he had to work around it during the summer, and because of that, he concentrated on speed and conditioning. But big picture, he says he feels recharged, and he understands that he needs to pick it up from where it was in the second half of last year. You and I both read the piece and went, there's a little thin line of excusey in there. And, of course, when last we heard from Elias, he was detailing knee pain that prevented him from continuing on as one of the top 10 scorers in the league. You remember where he was at the All-Star break. We were all saying 100 points and top 10 in league scoring and all of that, and it fell short of that. He, was also using that, also telling us that was the reason behind 1 goal in 13 games in the Stanley Cup playoffs and why he was so quiet. The coach came out immediately and called it tendinitis. It is quite clear that management has basically said, look, son, there's a difference between being injured and being hurt, and there are things you're going to have to push through if we're going to be a cup champion team. This is what happens with frontline players on other teams. This is where you need to project. This has got to be the trajectory for you if you're going to be a frontline player leading this team to a Stanley Cup. I got to say, I didn't quite love all the Pettersson comments in the IMAC article.
Well, there's only 2 options coming out of the article. One is it's excusey, and he's laying down that as a blanket catch-all for however he plays, or it's serious, or this is a tendonitis pain that is still recurrent, and that's a concern. So it's either one or the other. I mean,
I read it as he still wants to push back a little bit on Tocchet. That's how I read it.
Yeah, maybe.
I read it as, he might still be a little bit sore to hear the head coach so downplay whatever it is that's bothering him there.
But it's my understanding, Matt, that it goes higher, it goes above that. I think management is of the same mind. They're on lockstep here with Rick
exactly.
Tocchet.
Well,
there needs to be some stiffness in the spine here.
For sure.
From him.
Look, I mean, they've been around players like Sidney Crosby, and in Tocchet's case, going back to playing days and whatnot, guys like Rod Brindamore, guys who,
Sidney Crosby with a mouthful of mumps. Nope, I'm good. I'm good.
Wow. I mean, and they come from a school like the Monty Python Night, right?
Yes.
Like, lop off an arm and
Just a flesh wound.
Yeah. So, look, I think they're trying to instill that in Pettersson, and really his team, more so than just in Pettersson, broadly, culture. I think they're trying to instill that in culture. That said, Jim Rutherford spoke yesterday on this and said he is quite encouraged and comfortable with Elias Pettersson's summer and how he has come back. Let's take a listen to the Canucks president of hockey operations on expectations for Elias Pettersson this year.
Well, I have talked to him a few times, and I'm really impressed with how he's come back in the off season. He seems to be a guy that's more relaxed and more comfortable, and for obvious reasons. Last year, whether players say they think about their contracts or not, deep down they do. Everybody does, okay? And this is a guy that I believe's worked really hard this summer. He's done everything he can to play as a top-line player. And everybody here's seen him play. We all know how good he is. So the expectations for him is to be one of the top players on our team.
And that's great honesty on Rutherford's part with regards to the contract being a distraction, because he's absolutely right. You know, as much as players downplay it, say, I'm not thinking about it, I don't consider it. No, bullshit.
But Matt, I would say he was better without the contract than he was with.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was.
You know, like he was still wowing us on that Eastern road trip in January. It wasn't until after that.
The struggle started before the contract got signed, but you're quite right. Yes, he was better under the before he put pen to paper. Of that, there's no doubt. Look, Elias Pettersson is a fabulous player. We have been lucky to watch him here over the course of his career. He, at his best, is a tremendous two-way center who can be both a goal scorer and a playmaker and a Selke Trophy candidate. He is that level of great. I hope this year we see the joyful Elias Pettersson that we remember in his rookie year, in his early tenure of the Vancouver Canucks. I hope that the comments when we hear from him, the body language when we see him on the bench and at practice, get back to that young, earnest, optimistic delight of a young man and hockey player. So we talked about Blake. There was, because you remember at this time last year, we were talking about, does Elias Pettersson believe in the Vancouver Canucks? Is he going to re-sign a contract with the Vancouver Canucks after all the shit that they've put him through? I think there was a toll. I think there was absolutely a toll with all the crap that he had to go through under terrible management and ownership here over a number of years. Whether that was mishandling COVID outbreaks, whether that was all the coaching changes, whether that was an owner who wanted to be buddies and go to dinner with the players, and all the different things that were going on during that era that, let's face it, were not as professional as the operation that Jim Rutherford has designed here over the last couple of years.
Not to mention, Matt, the chance to win. Like,
well,
you heard it in the Demko quote. Like, I had to actually just sort of shake my head a little bit. Demko saying, I think I could have gone in the conference final. They were one win away from the conference final last year. You know, there are players that go years in careers without getting a sniff of the conference final. We're going to bring it up later in the show, Jaromir Jagr's career. After his Stanley Cups in the first 2 years of his career, look at how many times Jaromir Jagr got to the third round. Jaromir Jagr.
I know, as a legendary player, like as a no-doubt first ballot Hall of Famer who gets 2 quickie early cups when he's new to the NHL.
And then plays for 71 more years, and he only gets to 1 more cup. Like, it's rare. And this team, I don't think I'm not going to say they're on the cusp of a cup, but they're on the cusp of the cusp. And that's a pretty good spot to be, because you could have a surprise appearance in a cup when you're on the cusp of a cusp. So it's a good spot. And I hope that Elias Pettersson gets the joie de vivre back here a little bit. The excitement.
Yeah. I hope there's no lingering resentment for last year and Tocchet downplaying the injury. And I hope he understands. And Blake, you may know better than me on this because you're around young athletes and kids these days far more than me. But, coaches who are hard on you, coaches who want to toughen your hide, there are, in the moment, it can be difficult to take. In the long term, you were so better off for it. And I just think back to, when I was playing all the sports, the one coach who stands out is a drill sergeant football coach who may be a better player, maybe a better person because of how hard he was on me. I hope Elias, and to extent several other of the Vancouver Canucks, because I don't necessarily think that Brock Besser quite took to how hard Travis Green was on him. I hope Elias and Brock and some of the other young Canucks or Canucks, mid-career Canucks, who for the most part, I'm going to guess, have been mostly coddled by their coaches because they've been great players and great performers, understand and appreciate what the mantra is here, what the mission is for Tocchet and this coaching staff. They're trying to make you as resilient as you possibly can be as players and as people because they know what the Stanley Cup grind is, and they know it takes that to ultimately win the cup. I just hope that's broadly understood by Elias and the group this year.
I think the drill sergeant, it's a modern drill sergeant now, right? I don't think
it's a little bit different.
Yeah. I think you need to be able to speak to the player and communicate and be respectful of the player. And I think the Demko or the Tocchet strikes a nice balance there, but he does ask for accountability. And I think Elias Pettersson's got it within himself to be all that Rick Tocchet wants him to be. I think Petey's got that in him, but he's having trouble finding that in his gut right now. But let's hope it comes.
Teddy Bluger is on the shelf right now. Lower body injury, had a minor procedure. Patrick Alvin says he's about a week away. We also know that Cole McWard by the club is week to week with a lower body injury. He also had a procedure. He was skating today at the South Okanagan Events Center. Which leads us to center ice, where Rick Tocchet says that Pius Suter is going to be a centerman this year. Quote, we need that up the middle hockey IQ, and he has that. This is something we long speculated, Blake, that you're probably going to slot the centers Suter, Bluger, Suter. Also means that there's some opportunity here for Nils Aman. He can play center. He's not a great face-off guy, but should anything linger with Bluger, and they're going to keep a 13th forward anyways, might it be prudent to keep the guy who can play down the middle in Nils Aman? The training camp groups have been revealed. And look, the first thing that we'll say here at the coach's behest is that Tocchet says it's okay. His plan is to rotate some wingers, that nothing is set in stone. Don't read too much into it. And what you mentioned yesterday, Blake, which I think was very prescient, he called it different puzzles at different times. And that is, don't take a look at what's happening in camp or preseason or even early in the season in terms of line combinations and think that those are going to be the same come the Stanley Cup playoffs. In the Stanley Cup playoffs, you're going to make a whole lot of adjustments specific to that opponent and playing them night after night after night, as opposed to what you're going to do in the regular season.
Grinding out 382.
Yeah. Well, the most you're going to face the same opponent is back-to-back, right? So we say all that as caveat. It is She Loves and Patera in the A groups. The two NHL goaltenders have been put with the A group. Petey and DeBrusk are there, and we all anticipate that DeBrusk is the elusive winger for Elias Pettersson that they talked about. Lekkerimäki on that line, and we mentioned yesterday, don't be surprised to see Lekkerimäki get some run with some of the best players as a bit of a reward for young stars, as a little bit of a carrot on a stick. Here you go, kid. This is what's available to you if you have a good year. And Höglander and Garland there as well, Blake. And I do wonder whether that's with an eye towards who might play with Pettersson and DeBrusk. We talked about this earlier in the week. Garland is a right shot. Is he moving up now that Joshua is unavailable here for a little bit? Or are they going to go old standby with Nils Höglander alongside his buddy Elias Pettersson?
Well, we should also mention too in Group B, the early look is Heinen with Miller and Besser. And that stood out to me when I
Right.
saw the Group B come out as a possibility as well. So
yeah, Suter, Sherwood, and Sprong in that Group B. So for everyone who's high on Daniel Sprong, and again, Tockett's explanation applies here, but would not surprise me in the least to see them start Sprong in a bottom six, fourth line role and say, okay, kid, you're going to have to earn it. There is possibility you move up to lineup, play in the top six, play with better offensive players and be everything you can be as a goal scorer, but we want to see it first on the fourth line. I got to say the defense groups surprised me a little bit, confused me a little bit. He's got Roenick, Myers, and Mark Friedman in Group A, with Derek Forbert as the only true NHL lefty there.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's got Quinn Hughes, Carson Soucy, Vincent Desharnais, and Noah Juleson in Group B. Group C is pretty much exclusively minor leaguers and junior players.
Yeah,
everybody.
no one's been tunnel-ested
yet.
yet.
It's Group A and Group B that we're really fixating on here. So does that mean he wants to see Desharnais beside Quinn Hughes? Does that mean he wants to see Noah Juleson with Quinn Hughes?
I mean,
does that mean Soucy and Desharnais as opposed to what everyone was mocking up with Soucy and Myers? Lots to be determined there, but I was a little surprised with the way they separated the defensemen.
Far more time for Soucy Desharnais than Quinn Hughes Desharnais. For a variety of reasons.
Well, it could just be that he knows it's Hughes Roenick, and so let's experiment the entire way here through the.
Just what are the chances? I mean, Desharnais, questionable signing to me anyway, and then to give him the keys to the city, I don't see that happening. But
God, I hope Desharnais really breaks through. Just to shut you up on this, you are as down on this signing,
Matt, goes back to the playoffs.
I can remember. No, but. Yeah, no, I understand.
I criticized the player in orange and blue, so
I wonder if that. I would. Yeah, I'm wondering if that's an extension.
No, well, the point is with no home cooking needed, I was not a fan of the player, and I thought that was a weakness to be exploited by the Vancouver Canucks. And all of a sudden, he becomes a Vancouver Canuck. So, I mean, I can't all of a sudden just turn around and say, no, I think he'll be great, when I very clearly was not thinking that last spring. So. We'll see.
Do you see him as a seventh defenseman, Blake? Like, do you think?
I mean, it's up to the player. I mean, if he all of a sudden finds another level,
would you? Let me ask you right now: would you play Juleson over Desharnais on night one?
Without having seen any preseason, I would be tempted to. I've thought more of Juleson than I've ever thought of Desharnais, but I'm willing to be convinced come preseason that he's a better player than he showed in the.
I had so much respect and admiration for Juleson in the season that he forged last year, because, I mean, Blake, you'll remember down the stretch we were wondering if Juleson was their second best right shot defenseman, and then he got in the playoffs and it looked a little too big a moment for him. Yeah. You'll remember Juleson really struggled in the playoffs. So, but look, as we have talked about, there is not a ton of battles at this training camp. You can pretty much draw up the 23 players that are going to comprise the opening night lineup and scratches. Now, there are some injuries here now. There's Dakota Joshua's recovery. That could throw some things for a loop if over the next 2-3 weeks not everyone is able to make it back. But if you are looking for battles within the confines of the lineup, Juleson and Desharnais is the third pair right shot. Could be one. I mean, when you go out and sign a guy as a free agent, typically he's going to get the benefit of the doubt. And then, of course, where do guys figure in the lineup? We've talked about the top six. Is it going to be Heinen with Miller and Besser? Is someone else got an opportunity there? I think probably the biggest one is who's going to play on the wing with Pettersson and Brusk. And then, of course, in the bottom six, those wingers, who's going to play where, and is it going to be Suter or Bluger as their center iceman?
How many games do you think Juleson played last year for the Canucks?
Was it like 46, something like that?
closer. It's more than I would not have come close to either of these numbers, yours or the number that he played, which is 54. Like he played the majority of the Vancouver
I
Canucks
remember
games.
because I remember we did a show last year where it was, oh, look at that. Noah Juulsen has now officially played more than half the season because when he got to his 42nd game.
I would not have guessed that. It felt like 35 in my guts.
Yeah, well, I mean, they had enough, injuries, and of course, early in the year, and then at one point he rooted himself as the third pair defenseman. So, no, good on Abbotsford's Noah Juulsen. Good to see him back. Hope he too learned the lessons of the Stanley Cup playoffs and how difficult they are. And for the most part, he was pretty solid last year. You got to give him his due. That was a step up season. Now, I'm not sure he's ever going to realize the status of being a first round pick, 26 overall, as he was by the Habs in 2015. But it also wouldn't surprise me if Noah Juulsen turns into a regular third pair defenseman again this year for the Vancouver Canucks,
and he makes $775,000,
or as he continues on in his NHL career. In fact, talking in foot and the way they've been able to coach up players, that's entry. That's a fascination this year. Can Juulsen take another step forward? Because if he can take another step forward, wow, that's a really good development.
You'll have to pay for it if he does take another step forward. But right now, if he's an everyday player for the Vancouver Canucks, it's $775,000.
Tremendous.
Like that affords you all sorts of discounts everywhere else in the lineup. It's like we always say, you need an ELC to take the burden off. That's like an ELC. That's like a rookie.
Yep. So and like his toughness too. Jim Rutherford said he has no real update on a practice facility. He said there's a few options. They're making headway, but he said he wasn't even going to use the word hopefully because of what he said last year, and none of it came to pass. I mean, the horse very much looks like it's out of the barn here, and that is the Aquilinis are looking for a sweetheart deal and are unwilling to buck up and pay the freight unless they find a partner who's going to give them a sweetheart deal. It's too bad because we give them their credit for pouring money into the player expenditures over the course of their ownership, and there has been no dollar spared there. There has been dollars spared here on the practice facility side of things, much like the seats at Rogers Arena. Neither of them are revenue generating, and neither of them seem to be a priority. For this
somebody
ownership.
Reach out to me and say, what do you expect out of this? Of course, every businessman is going to look for a good deal, and that's true. But
I expect the owners of an asset worth about $1.5 to $2 billion to spend tens of millions of dollars on a practice facility to stay with industry standard. That's what I would expect.
Well, and the longer you wait, you are hurting the team to some regard, because a state-of-the-art practice facility is going to aid the team indirectly, and also aids in, I think, attracting free agents. Who was it? Somebody recent signing landed here and said didn't know that there wasn't a practice facility. I think there was the assumption that there was.
I think it was Desharnais.
Yeah. So you're kind of hurting the team there, and without knowing the exact details of the deals that they have tried, like there was that Plaza Nations deal that they tried to, I mean, it's impossible to know if you're just being negligent, walking away from a reasonable ask. We have no idea if any of the negotiations have been so crazy that, hey, they were well within their rights to walk away, or if they're just trying to juice every cent to the point where they're turning down reasonable business deals because they want something for free. So it's we don't know the details, but it looks bad, and it looks a little presumptive too of Jim Rutherford to arrive in the market and say, we're going to get this done. I mean, you got to look around. There's not a lot of free real estate in Vancouver, like there is in a lot of other places where you can just keep on going outside the city and find free land.
So during the Canucks decade of despair, there was a lot of creative thinking going on. There were also a lot of seats available at Rogers Arena. Now, just canvassing my friends who have Canucks season tickets. Some said, oh, yeah, they stuck it to me on the renewal this year with an increase. Others said, actually, it was pretty reasonable considering what I was expecting the jump to be. But it's clear that last year, Rogers Arena Canucks hockey became a hot ticket again. And it happened early, actually, after their terrific start. So the buzz is back, the vibe is back, the fun is back, and the prices are up again. And that means no more Larscheiders. The fan group that took it upon itself to try and bring some energy, some spirit, some support to what were some sad sack Canucks teams by filling up a section and really behaving like a soccer supporters group, right? Standing during the whole game, chanting, singing. For some, it was a welcome addition to Rogers Arena. For others, it was an annoyance. Couple different takes from even within the Larscheiders group, Blake. This is Lord Yoshi on Reddit. 10 years support to be thrown out the window at first chance once the team becomes relevant. So much for emphasis on, quote, fan engagement. More context, we have bought out section 325, 326 for 7 to 9 games for the last decade of losing seasons. We're a passionate fan club who stood all game, gave unwavering support no matter how bad the team was. Now the team is good, sales are better, and we are not being given the choice of buying out our section anymore. Another, at Broken Flash 8 on X. Well, it was fun while it lasted. We accomplished what we set out to do, make Canucks hockey fun again. Left the players with some amazing memories and the fan base with a different style of cheering on our boys. See you out there. Go Canucks, go. And I can see it both sides if I was inside the Larscheiders group and had become accustomed to going to 7 to 9 games a year by buying out a section and having this sort of energy and environment created around me.
By all accounts, and I don't know if this is necessarily better, it's just different criticism. They were just overlooked. It sounds like after year of doing this, they were kind of forgotten by Canucks sales, and they sold their seats from under their nose. And I think there's tail between legs in the Canucks organization right now that they did so. And I think there are attempts to make good on all this, and it still might be salvaged in the end. But I think rather than being nefarious, they were just taken for granted, I think. And
yeah, and
that's, which is, again, not necessarily better. It's just different.
I know. Sadly, it has been a through line from Canucks Sports Entertainment and their business operations over the years, taking certain things for granted. So that part I very much sympathize with for the Larscheiders who are put out and do feel overlooked here because you were. And you did deserve better.
And I can't help but think that,
I mean, their money is as good as anybody else's, right?
I can't help but think that all the turnover in leadership in the business operations department has something to do with this too. Like, honestly, I wonder if inter-office phones work at this point.
Well, that is one thing that gets lost when you turn over staff as often as the Aquilinius and Canucks Sports Entertainment has turned over staff. You lose institutional knowledge.
Right.
You lose connection with your customer and the community.
This sounds like a sales manager or sales director is brand new and didn't know they existed. Maybe, like, who knows? But we'll see. Maybe they get resolved.
Let's get to today's menu. It is brought to you by our friends at Greta. And if you are looking for a fun spot to watch the game, hey, hockey season around the corner, even before it gets going. You got plenty going on at Greta: baseball, football, soccer, and once hockey does get going, great spot for all games, home and away. We'll be there for Canucks Army viewing parties throughout the season. Details on that coming soon. Minutes from the arena and the stadium. Come by before, after the game. Of course, check out the great street food menu and the arcade. And it is a fabulous arcade. Weekly drink specials. Greta, the place to be. 50 West Cordova, Greta Bar. Let the games begin. Contrary to what our initial tweet on this said, it is Noah Strang of the Daily Hive, not Rob the hockey guy, who will be joining us from Penticton in the South Okanagan Event Center. I know it's reflexive. We talked to Rob on Thursdays, or we have. Rob's been...
Well, the signage was right. We just tagged Rob by accident.
Right. Yeah. So Noah Strang is going to join us. First time on Sekeresandprice. Looking forward to this with the update because he took in all the proceedings yesterday and today from the hockey club. We'll also talk to Patrick Johnston of the Province and Post Media coming up on today's show, and he's back with us again this year as well. Okay, Blake Price, time now for our Bet365 Bets of the Day. This segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Sekeresandprice. We are fortunate to have them. And Thursday night football. Listen to this stat. Teams off an overtime game with 4 days of rest or less versus a foe not off an overtime game. 3-23 against the spread since 2002.
Wow.
A winning percentage of 11.5%. The New England Patriots qualify as that team tonight. Of course, they lost the Seahawks game on Sunday at Foxborough in overtime. The quarterback, Jacoby Brissett, boy, did he get beat up by that Seahawks pass rush. They're taking on the Jets tonight in New York. Jets, Jets, home opener. And I'm going to lay 6 points with Aaron Rodgers and New York because I stumbled upon this stat.
I am building off of this momentum. I'm going on the under for Jacoby Brissett. It is merely 164 yards or less. But I think that if it is a disaster for Jacoby Brissett, maybe they turn to the rookie and have him finish it. Like I think Jacoby Brissett's got to get his 160 yards in 3 quarters is my point. And I don't even think that he's got that. So
I mean, he was grabbing his ribs, he was grabbing his arm, he was abused by that Seahawks defense last week. I'm with you. If he makes it through 4 quarters tonight, give the guy a bravery price because that's going to take a hell of a lot of courage with that Jets pass rush coming at him now.
Conversely, I was also going to go the under on Aaron Rodgers, which says a lot about the potential entertainment value of tonight's contest. I was going to go under 217 for
some of us are going out for the game, meeting friends. Let's hope that it's got some sizzle to it. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS, altogether, all one word, when opening that account. Noah Strang of the Daily Hive. He's coming up next.
Normally when we talk about Greta Bar YVR, we're telling you make it a game night at Greta, and we're talking about hockey. Of course, we're not quite yet at hockey season, but game night can mean whatever it means, and that could mean soccer or football game to watch on the screen or your own games, because the arcade is half the fun at Greta Bar YVR. Make it your game night at 50 West Cordova. And of course, great food and drink specials. And you can also make it a late game night as they're open late every single night. So make it a late game night, your game night at Greta Bar YVR, 50 West Cordova.
Some price from the historic Wall Center. Noah Strang covers the Vancouver Canucks for the Daily Hive. He's up in Penticton at the South Okanagan Event Center. And he joins us now. First hit on sekeresandprice. How you doing, Noah?
I'm doing well. Thank you both for having me on.
No, thank you very much for joining us there. Okay. What did you hear from Thatcher Demko, and how worried should Canucks fans be about the news this morning?
It was interesting to hear him speak about his injury, especially when he mentioned that they couldn't find one other hockey player who had ever had this specific type of injury. He said they found a couple soccer players, but no hockey players. And of course, that's a bit concerning to hear because, as he mentioned, they don't really have any case studies and research to base his recovery off. At the end, in the playoffs last year, I think many expected that if the Canucks made it to the next round, he might be able to play. But as he discussed over the summer, things didn't really progress how they thought, and he's still obviously not at training camp participating fully. He didn't give a timeline as to when he expects to be back on the ice, but he was taking some light shots before Group A took the ice today. So that is a good sign, but it's still up in the air when he'll be back exactly.
How were his spirits? What was his body language? What kind of mood was he in, Noah?
His spirits actually seemed okay. He seemed happy about how the last 2 to 3 weeks had gone. And one thing that I thought was impressive was he really felt a responsibility to take it upon himself to discuss his injury with the media yesterday. Obviously, we talked to Alvin, Tocchet, and Rutherford, and Alvin deferred any questions about Demko to today. And Demko said that he wanted to be the one. He called himself, he said, I'm a grown man. I want to be the one to get in front of you guys and speak about what has been going on in my life this summer. He also mentioned that he did undergo a procedure, but he said it was not related to the injury suffered in the playoffs last year. He called it very minor, but that's also something interesting to note.
Do you think that what he said and that in particular, but really all of it, do you think it's going to worry Canucks fans that it's unique, that no one knows anything about it, that there was another injury here as well that he had? I mean, is it scary, or the fact that he's facing the music, do you think it adds some comfort to Canucks fans?
I mean, how can it not be scary hearing that it's such a unique injury, there are certain injuries that hockey players suffer all the time and they recover, and we've seen it time and time again. But with something like this, with just so much unknown, I think it's natural to be a little bit more scared than with a typical injury recovery.
He's a pretty big part of the solution for the Canucks. Do you think that was part of his answers here today as well, knowing that, a lot of people are going to put the fate of the start of the season on his shoulders?
For sure. I mean, as you said, he's a huge part of this team. A lot of how the team does rests on his shoulders a lot of the time, and he also covers up for some of the deficiencies that we've seen in the team over the past couple of years. I think he definitely feels responsibility to be part of this team, and as he said, missing the playoff games last year were some of the hardest times for him mentally of his entire life. So this is a player that cares. He's uber competitive, and I think that he'll be back on the ice as soon as he can. It just remains to be seen when that will be.
Noah, how closely now will you watch Archer Sheloves, Yuri Patera, Dylan Ferguson, Nikita Tolopilo, and the rest of the goalies, knowing that Thatcher is on the sidelines?
Of course, all those guys are going to have a spotlight on them up here in Penticton. Everyone's going to want to see how they do. The Canucks, as of right now, looking like they could enter the season with two goalies, I think, have a combined fewer than 30 games, regular season and playoffs at the NHL level between them. So that's always concerning. I mean, especially when you're a team that has such high hopes like the Canucks do for this season. We'll see how they perform. I mean, it's just training camp, so you can't take too much from it, but there'll definitely be a lot of people keeping an eye on how they do over the next few days.
And she loves health as well. I mean, we know what happened with Latvia and the qualifying tournament. I mean, it's going to be hard not to put a magnifying glass on his every movement to see if he's still feeling any ill effects himself.
100%. And, it was hard to know exactly what to take from the statements put out by the Latvian Federation with some of the translation things, but it did kind of sound like it could have been almost like an overuse thing. So if he's pushed into a full starting role, that could be another thing to monitor as the season goes on.
Noah, let's switch gears here. This came up yesterday. We've played the Jim Rutherford clip. What do you think? Are these Canucks as good as the team last year?
Well, I thought it was interesting because I think when Rutherford spoke, he said that this team is as good as the team at the start of the year last year. And obviously they made some big additions. We know Jim Rutherford. We know how he likes to operate, and there's typically big swings if he thinks that his team is in contention throughout the year. I think if this team can be in one of those top three spots in the division heading into January, February, he's not going to be afraid once again to pull off a big swing like he did last year with Lindholm or Zadorov. I think this roster is definitely as good as the one that started the year last year, but it's not maybe as good as the one that ended the year, but there's still time to catch up.
Do you think when he was answering that question, though, in his mind, he's thinking Thatcher Demko in between the pipes, like to bring both of these answers together?
For sure.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I think Demko's such a big part of the team that without him, it's a completely different picture. You're looking at two unproven goalies. There's a lot more question marks. So I think he's definitely thinking about Thatcher Demko in that scenario.
What about the early look for Elias Pettersson on his wings and the fact that Jonathan Lekkerimäki is, and we prognosticated this yesterday, but what do you think it means ultimately that Lekkerimäki's getting a brief look here alongside?
We'll see. I think it means that he impressed them at Young Stars. He looked maybe a little bit more ready than some were expecting. I mean, I was impressed with the way he handled the puck and the way he looked with the puck on his stick. I think that he's earned the look there. It's only day one of training camp again. Like Talk had said yesterday, you can't read in too much to any of the combinations or lines that they put out there. But just the fact that, like you mentioned, he's getting to start there, even if it's just a brief look, I think is encouraging. And who knows, the crazier things have happened before, and it'll be interesting to see how he looks in that position over the next however many skates he gets there.
He still said the knee bothered him a little bit over the course of the summer. We learned yesterday that Teddy Bluger is going to miss a week with a lower body injury, that he had an off-season procedure, and all of that leads to Pius Suter in the middle, Noah. Boy, they really need Pius Suter in the middle now. Suddenly center depth is a little bit front of mind as well.
For sure. The team already before the news came out about Bluger, you could look at the centers. They're strong, but maybe not Stanley Cup contender strong, which is where this team hopes to be, obviously. And now with the news that Bluger's out and Pettersson still feeling that knee a little bit, a big share of responsibility will likely fall on Suter's shoulders. I thought that he looked strong last year. They moved him around a couple different positions, but overall he gave them a lot of good minutes, and I think he can do the same this year, especially if he gets to play with someone like Connor Garland or something on that third line. Those wingers really drive play well and make it easier for their center.
So the good news for you, Noah, is that apparently Coach Tocchet doesn't believe in mountains and bag skates and all of that, so you don't have to stick around late to get that elusive video of the prospect face down prone in the corner after exhausting himself. But he is emphasizing speed at this camp, not to mention trying to generate more rush chances. So you expect to see a lot of drills like that. It looks like it could be some pretty lively, pretty fun sessions there at camp.
I do for sure expect to see that. At the end of last year, even across the whole second half of the season into the playoffs, we saw that the Canucks struggled a little bit to generate as many scoring chances and shots on net maybe as the elite teams in the league do. And I think that's something that Tocchet definitely noted and something that he's looking to change this year. And he obviously a smart guy, and he knows what needs to happen there. And I think that emphasis on speed and rushes, like he said yesterday, maybe they're playing a bit too safe at times, is he's trying to get them to open up and use their creativity and skill. And there's a lot of skilled players on this team, and a lot of the guys that they brought in are skilled and fast, and making that more of their identity, I think, is one of their goals going forward.
They're gambling that a bunch of players will find another level. They're gambling that one or two of a group of players that they're gambling on will be able to find a new level. I don't think they are delusional in thinking that everybody's going to hit and reach new career highs. But who are you curious about the most here that can maybe be one of those guys?
Well, I mean, at the top of the lineup, I think the easy answer is Jake DeBrusk. I mean, he's coming in, he scored 25 goals 3 times in this league, and he's now going to get the best opportunity of his career to play beside a 100-point center, whether it's Pettersson or Miller. I mean, taking that next step from 27 to 30 or 35 goals would obviously be a huge boost for this Canucks team. In terms of maybe some of the guys closer to the bottom of the lineup that I'm excited to see, Kiefer Sherwood's a name that's been really interesting to me this summer. I mean, he's a guy that I noticed a lot when the Canucks played Nashville, and if you look at his AHL numbers, I mean, he could put up a ton of points in the AHL. It just hasn't quite translated to the NHL. I think that maybe there could be another step there for a player like that.
Terrific work, Noah. Thank you for the time and opportunity there in Penticton. I've already forgot about that Rob, what's his name, Blake? Rob,
baseball
the
guy?
European travel guy, the
Yeah.
Crystal Palace guy. Awesome work. Thanks, Noah. Appreciate it.
Thank you both so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the Nat. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Sekeresandprice from the historic Wall Center, and this next guest brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians. The Vancouver Canadians want to thank Seas fans for another great season at the Nat this summer. And if you're looking to guarantee your seat for all the action in 2025, please visit CanadiansBaseball.com or call 604-872-5232. Patrick Johnston of the Province and Post Media is our guest. He joins us Thursdays again this year. And Patrick, we're going to start with Elias Pettersson, who speaks to Ian McIntyre, says he still feels something with his knee sometimes, but it's better than last season, that he had to work around the knee this summer, concentrated on speed and conditioning, but that he feels recharged. He's still talking about his knee. Good or bad thing for the Vancouver Canucks?
I mean, I guess this is old age, except he's in his mid-20s. I've been thinking a lot about this. I mean, certainly from the standpoint that at some point, all of us in our lives have to work to adapt around something, right? So some of that is just that. Most players don't tend to talk about the nitty-gritty little problems they're having. They just, and I mean, of all people, he certainly has never wanted to, right? Like he's never wanted to raise whatever he's dealing with as as a perceived excuse. That's the other thing with hockey players is they're endlessly terrified of being thought of making an excuse. And you're like, no, just tell them what's going on. Like there's no excuse. Sometimes you're dealing with this or that or the other. And like you have to deal with it. Nobody thinks you're complaining. So I suppose credit to him for speaking frankly on it. Nonetheless, we all noted at times a lack of pace in his skating last year. And it's pretty clear in hindsight was because he wasn't feeling 100%. So yeah, sure, it's going to be a question. If he starts out slow, we're going to say, well, there's the tendonitis, and this is going to be a problem for his entire life. And if you're the Canucks and you just signed him to a massive contract, you're going, oh boy. But we know at his best, he's such a fantastic player. I had, and he's still so young. I think there's this is going to be a minor thing that will bounce up from time to time, I suppose. And
I don't love it though. I don't love it.
You don't love it. No,
I don't love the 3.5 months of rehab. Can't get rid of it.
Well, it's a rest thing, right? And that is the other thing, is that the more you get into the season, the less and less really you have to recover. Even if you get to the All-Star break or whatever, and what are we calling it? The nation? What is it called? Four Nations break.
Four Nations, the international break.
Like that's when you want to have a little break there, and he may not get that. And the season's tough, the season's long, and the longer you go, the more you need the longer you go without like proper rest, the more it builds up and it accumulates and snowballs. And an injury like this, which essentially wants you to rest and not push it. It's like the Seelops question, like look what happened this summer, and he had knee inflammation, whatever that means, right? But like it's the same thing as things go on and on. Thatcher Demko, wear and tear, like it's all of these things that we are wondering about are all the same, and they're all about the intensity of the schedule and when you can actually sit back. And like Blake, I wouldn't say 3.5 months of rehab, it's 300 months of opportunity to not push it. So the fact he worked around it, I mean, I suppose that's good. That means they were trying to find ways to rest, but at the end of the day, he's still talking about it.
Look, there are some who believe that the Vancouver Canucks are Stanley Cup contenders here, and that the season will not be a success other than lifting the chalice. There are others who would look at it more as a step-by-step progression, and that after getting to the second round, then a successful season would be the conference final or appearing in the Stanley Cup final this year. How much of this season do you believe is Rutherford, Allvin, Tocchet evaluating whether they think they can win a cup with Elias playing a frontline role?
I hadn't thought about that. That's a great question. I mean, listen, they've committed to the player, right? Like this is a player that they wanted. It was a priority for them last year in their decision making, right? They weren't sure what they were going to do at the deadline until they actually signed him. And when they signed him, they did shift gears. Like that is very clear. Patrick Allvin said as much, that knowing that it was no longer some sort of short-term window where they were going to be scrambling to figure out what was going on. They really had to push all their chips in, knowing they didn't necessarily have to do that. They didn't have to accept prices for things that they weren't comfortable with. That did change it. But nonetheless, as Jim Rutherford tells me every time I ask him questions about, player acquisitions or roster building, he goes, we consider everything all the time. So of course, I mean, inevitably this group is going to be, what is this guy going to be? What can he do? But that's also why they signed Jake DeBrusk. They think Jake DeBrusk is a guy that will help him be the player he needs to be. Daniel Strang, perhaps, but at the end of the day, they needed one guy. They found a guy who was a huge upgrade, they believe, over Ilya Mikheyev, and we'll see how it goes. It should work. If it doesn't work, I suppose they'll begin reassessing the situation. They have 1 year to think about all that. I don't think that's their plan, but
he thinks they're slightly better this year at the start of the year than last year. Is that about right?
I mean, I do think their forwards are better. I think there are always question marks about Kuzmenko. He had such a good start, obviously had an incredible first season here. I don't think there was anybody who believed, other than perhaps the player and his agent, that he could be the goal scorer that he had proved to be in his first season, in his second season. I don't think anything, but I think they thought Kuzmenko would be better, but in the end, he wasn't. Mikheyev ended up being a disaster. As much as you wanted him not to be, he was. And then the sort of lack of options. You remember, let's not forget, they started the season with Phil DiGiuseppe on a line with Miller and Besser, right? And now they have Danton Heinen, and I think Danton Heinen, or whoever it is, but Danton Heinen is a better option. Niels Höglander is not the obvious option on Elias. I mean, remember, he didn't even start the season on Elias Pettersson wing. He started on the fourth line, ended up having a strong season, but he wasn't, you could tell that they didn't believe in him being the long-term solution there. maybe it's Daniel Sprong. I mean, Daniel Sprong obviously is a dart throw, right? I don't want to overcook. I've mentioned him twice or three times now. I don't want to overcook him, but like there are some options up front. To me, the questions are on the back end. The Carson Soucy had a better season than I think anybody expected he would have when he was healthy. But is he really a number 3? Like, how does that all shake? If Vinny Desharnais, I mean, listen, I am prepared to be surprised. But the player I saw in Edmonton didn't strike me as a player that made sense here, but here he is. And Derek Forbort has been mostly a 6-7 guy for the last few seasons. So, are you leaning on him? Like the questions for me are on the blue line and of course in goal where, we see Demko on the ice today. So that's taking shots. So that's promising. But, question marks still in goal. Like Shilov's did everything he could in the playoffs. They didn't lose because of him, but you could see the cracks appearing as the playoffs moved along. This guy is not, at least not right now, ready to be a full-time NHL number 1 starter. He's certainly ready to be a backup. But, to me, there's enough question marks that I go, I think, can they be as good as last year? Yes. I don't know if they're going to get the same bounces. No one should expect that. But on the whole, that was a strong defensive team last year. This team should still be pretty strong defensively. The question is, as Rick Talk had identified yesterday, can they score off the rush? Can they change things up a little bit in how they create their scoring opportunities?
We try every year not to read into the training camp groupings, and yet every year they kind of do mean something. Like we always give the caveat, and they can change everything, but often, at least from the forward lines, I feel like defensive pairings are more malleable. But the guys that they tinker with in preseason, often there is something to it to start the season. And as we wonder who's going to be skating with Besser and Miller, can't help but see the Danton Heinen's in that group. And I do wonder what they were thinking as they split up all these groups. And you have to think it's because they wanted to see extra time of so-and-so with so-and-so.
All the Swedes together in Group A and forwards, right? Carlson, Ulrichsen, Pettersson, other Pettersson, Höglander,
Patterson, not a Swede, but a son.
All the sons, all the Swedes. Exactly. Like some interesting bits in there. No surprise, Pettersson and DeBrusk. No Sprong in that group. I've talked enough about him. There we go. Another mention. You guys will have to have like a little ticker rolling.
Hoaglander in that group, though.
That tells you. I mean, that's a sign there what they're looking at. But interesting to me. Obviously, losing Dakota Joshua on these. That Sammy Blais, I think is an interesting, perhaps at least placeholder for now. No obvious center for the moment for Garland. I mean, normally you think it'd be Bluger. Of course, he's also out. So, Nate Smith, I kind of was intrigued to see him. I mean, Nate Smith's certainly a competent defensive center, but not a ton of NHL experience. I mean, Ratu. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Ratu. Ratu is like, this is a big year for him. Obviously had the strong young stars, a man among boys, really still pretty young. But this is a player that the Canucks traded for because they believed in, right? And they really need him. That's a young. They don't have a lot of prospects, and Ratu's sort of book so far has been pretty mixed. But that's a player that I think they need to see something from, and so interesting to me to see that perhaps maybe I'll be interested to see how they actually skate, but perhaps he's in there with Garland and whether it's Blais or Nils Oman or Linus Karlsson, who obviously made some impression last year. Whether him and Archie Baines can be more regular call-ups or depth forwards. Can they push Giuseppe out of a job? Some certainly always interesting questions in any camp, and right off the top we can see that in how Group A set up.
The defensive pairings, do you suspect that they will do what they did last year and they keep us on pins and needles with regards to Hughes and Rona, because they're in separate groups right now? And then they airdrop them back in together to start the season. You suspect they're going to do the same, just see what everybody else looks like with them, and then they know that they've got that in their back pocket?
Well, if you have your top 6, right, like Hronek, Forbort, and Myers right now are all penciled in your top 6. You're not going to necessarily put them all in one group. So 3 of them are with this group. And then you've got a couple guys that certainly have shown they can play in the NHL, and Friedman and Willanen. And then you have Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, DPD. who the Canucks obviously have high hopes for and would like to see him in the NHL. Hronek, obviously has been a talking point from the team itself about whether they can actually get him off the Hughes pairing. They would ideally. I said this when they first got him. I thought that their dream was to have two pairings. It didn't work out last year. Obviously, they had incredibly dominant pairing, him and Hughes. It's hard to get away from that. I can see why in the end you go back to that, but they need to see if they can find a way to live with both of them, on different pairings. And right now, the way it sets up, it's not obvious to me. I don't think any of the guys that are, I don't think realistically you're going to end up with a Hronek forward pairing, but I don't know, maybe you do. Myers Hughes obviously isn't happening off the top. Hughes with Noah Juleson, we've seen that before. Certainly been some noise about maybe Desharnais somehow works with him.
Quads just threw that out there on social media.
Like that's certainly been noise I've heard in the back. I'm like, great. Like I said, from what we saw, especially in the playoffs, I don't see it. But I'm also not a professional hockey coach, so I will defer to Rick Tockett's interests on this one. We'll see how it goes.
Patrick, independent of what Thatcher Demko had to say today, that he wanted to say it personally, as Alvin explained, because of the privacy for the players.
Right.
Now, it may well be that Thatcher Demko is just uncomfortable with anyone other than Thatcher Demko talking about his body.
Right.
But I also wonder whether that has something to do with, I hurt my knee, Elias said, and Tocchet calling it tendinitis. I do wonder whether there was a chill sent over the group there that, we've got a coach who isn't exactly going to characterize the injuries as direly as we might when we speak of them at the end of last season. What do you make that Demko wanted to speak to this himself today and not allow management to speak on his behalf?
Well, I mean, certainly management has respected. I have every reason to think management has respected the wishes on that. The fact we haven't been able to get anything from anybody was clearly because in the end, the player himself wanted to talk about it. Now, I hear what you're saying, Matt. And I do find myself wondering the flip side, whether in the end you have Tocchet saying, well, this is my take, but if you guys want to say something else, it's on you. I have to explain what I understand, Like you guys need to step up here. I don't have any reason to think that's it, but
that's fair too. Yeah.
But in the end, none of us know the same truth, right? We all know what we've seen, what we've experienced. Some of us are better than others at understanding what we've seen, right? And what we want to say. At the end of the day, if you don't want people to talk about it, you got to explain what you know. And that, I would say it is a smart decision on Demko's part to stand up, say here, if it, like to want to speak to it himself. The instinct towards not speaking on stuff it exists. I don't always think it's wise. Because all you do, I wrote about this when the noise first came up. I said, inevitably people are going to want to fill the vacuum. You leave a lack of information, people start babbling about it. Right. So there's sort of two ways to look at this. And I think, sure, there's your version. There could be, or maybe three ways, or there's just, in the end, organizationally, they just need to get better at this. And
I just wonder whether, players talk. And, Elias goes out of his way to talk about how that knee hampered him.
Yeah.
And Tocchet so downplayed it. I do wonder whether the players looked around and went, okay, like, I don't want coach talking about my injury anymore because he made it sound like nothing. And it's actually more than nothing.
It's tough to read because I'm not grousing here, but I'm not going to talk too much about the sausages made, but certainly there is an element of, there is a longstanding hesitation from this group to talk in general. That's how it is,
Except for the head coach. The head coach likes to talk. The president of hockey and would like to talk more.
Yeah.
Everybody else doesn't want to talk.
Yeah. And so certainly our instincts, you guys should talk more because obviously that's self-serving on our part. But I think I do come back. If you guys don't want gossip, if you don't want people running crazy, social media going nuts, like the challenge is the social media aspect.
You have agency. You have agency to cut that off at the pass if you so choose.
There is a way to do it. And so listen, I would love to think this is a new door. We're stepping into a new future. We're just going to, I'm dealing with this, or nope, I'm going to be like this, or this is how it is. I'm going to give you an update today, and blah, blah, blah. Great. I'm not holding my breath. But listen, I'll just say this. Credit to the player for wanting to take on the issue and talk to him about it himself, even if it took a long time.
Right. Marvelous stuff. Thank you for this. We'll catch up next week, my dude.
Take care, guys.
It's happy hour on Sekeresandprice. Today's beer of the day from Yellow Dog is the Retriever Golden Ale.
Some price from the historic Wall Center. You can text us 778-402-9680. Email live at sekeresandprice.com. Well, the Caps got a result. It came late. A 1-1 draw down in Houston last night against the Dynamo. A late goal from Brian White, making his return to the lineup. He had not played since August 27th. And they need him. They need goals. He scores goals. So Vancouver maintains sixth place in the MLS West, but they got some help on the out-of-town scoreboard. In fact, 3 of the 4 matches that really concerned them with direct competitors went either their way or no blood.
Right.
Colorado lost 4-1 to Sport. And we talked about this Tuesday with Jeff. You don't expect a lot of help on the out-of-town scoreboard because all the direct competitors were playing weaker teams in the MLS West. But Sporting Kansas City forges a 4-1 victory over the Colorado Rapids. Seattle can only manage a draw in San Jose or versus San Jose.
Dreadful San Jose team.
Against a horrible San Jose team. LAFC needs a late goal to tie and equalize Austin. And the only result that went against them was the game you called, Blake, where Real Salt Lake beats FC Dallas 3-2.
Weird one, by the way. A weird one. Go see the highlights of that game, folks. Very
So the stakes now are if Vancouver wins its game in hand, and as we've been telling you for weeks here, they have a game in hand and will have a game in hand for some time because of the rescheduling of that LAFC match that had to be postponed due to LAFC doing well in
Leagues Cup.
Leagues Cup, of course.
But Matt, that match all of a sudden on October 3rd, that could be worth something. That could be worth a rung in the standings because LAFC is trying to manage their roster down the stretch. They want to make sure they're fully healthy and that not everybody's exhausted come the playoffs. And in doing so, they're not their full self every single night. And if they continue to just sort of middle the rest of the way, they're going to be at risk of falling to 4th maybe in the top 4 because they just don't dress their full best 11 every time.
Top 4, of course, means home pitch advantage in a best 2 of 3 opening round MLS playoff round. Vancouver is now just 3 back of LAFC for 3rd place. They're on the same number of games. LAFC is the only other team on so few games. Vancouver is 1 point back of Seattle, but they have 2 games in hand for 5th. They're 1 point back of Colorado, but they have a game in hand on the Rapids as well.
If they win their game in hand, Matt, they're 1 point back of 2nd with equal games played.
Now, look, things can take a turn on Saturday because Vancouver is into the Galaxy. LA, the best team in MLS West, and by margin. They're at 55 points, which is number 1 in the conference. Salt Lake is 2nd at 50. So this will be a tough match. You're probably happy if you get out of this one with a draw.
But it could be the first time we against Portland. It could be the first time we see the best 11, though, for the Whitecaps. Now, Andres Kubas left at halftime with a contusion injury. Probably Charlie Horse is my guess. So you can get over Charlie Horse in a few days. So let's hope he's ready to go. But Stuart Armstrong stayed back to train heavily. I wonder if that's with an eye to him starting versus LA. Ali Ahmed had a contusion as well. Did the same thing, kept behind in Vancouver to train heavily. Again, I wonder if that's to start in LA. And if that is the case, and if Kubas can go, we're looking at the legit best 11 with White and Fafa Pico in the I mean, Matt, I think that team can beat the LA Galaxy.
Well, and the other thing is the one thing I'll say though, you mentioned LAFC is sort of playing things cautiously with their roster. Cap schedule is still very busy here.
Yeah.
Saturday in LA, then of course the Canadian Championship Wednesday here at BC Place, and then back here against Portland a week from Saturday. So no rest for the wicked here Also a Wednesday game in early October versus Seattle. So a very, very busy stretch continues. What is it, 7 games in 22 days?
Yeah. So they've gone through 2 of them, but still 5 more to go.
Mm-hmm.
We should tell you about the Canadian
Yes,
Championship
please
game
do.
because there's good fun to be had there on September the 25th. Remember, 7 p.m. kickoff, not the 7:30. They go for that three-peat in the Voyageurs Cup. They'll be taking on TFC too, so it's a rival, and they'll try to repeat the drama of that epic shootout win in 2022. They could book their spot into the CONCACAF Champions Cup with a victory as well. Free t-shirt for the first 10,000 fans and 50% off all beverages until kickoff. So get there early, enjoy yourself, and create some atmosphere. The Whitecaps are hosting a TFC merch exchange as well for free tickets at the Caps team store on September 20th and 21st. It's the Caps and TFC TELUS Canadian Championship, Wednesday the 25th. September 25th, of course, and go check it out, whitecapsfc.com to get your tickets now.
Poll question results. Does Alex Edler belong in the Canucks Ring of Honor? 1,400 votes here. Blake, what did the people say?
I think they said yes.
They did. Percentage?
68.
71. John, you guys have got to stop celebrating mediocrity with these tedious polls. Okay, John. Rob the Sided Guy. How is this not 100%, people? He was their best defenseman during their most dominant years, and he would have been their best ever if Jim Benning didn't get gifted Hughes in the weirdest draft choices ever by GMs ahead of pick 7.
Yeah, so back to the previous guy, mediocrity. He's the franchise leader in everything and took them to a Stanley Cup final. There's not much mediocrity there.
Yeah, 1,000 NHL games, going to an all-star game, 100-plus goals in your career. That's not really mediocrity.
It's not a Norris candidate, but
no,
he'd be in the rafters if he was a Norris candidate.
Of course. Deacon says, hell no, letting him retire as a Canuck is his just reward. And then Hayes asks, as a goalie? And he did like to play backup goalie, Alex. And I don't mean in a roster definition. I mean in a physical on the ice, be behind the goalie.
We did see that
level.
We did see that in some of our reaction from our YouTube viewers yesterday, is people just saying, great player, but his mistakes were so big.
Yep.
And his want to play goalie annoyed people so much that it has degraded some of his legend, right. I think.
Broken sticks and other things. Hayes asked, what is a memorable Alex Edler moment? And it's true. None jumps to mind. I'll remind you that Harold Sneps is in the Ring of Honor. What's a memorable Sneps moment? Giving the puck away to Bossy in Game 1 of the 82 Cup Final is probably the moment most people remember with Harold Sneps.
Edler's legendary game versus the LA Kings
in the playoffs, where he hit everything in sight.
Yeah. Monster.
Yeah. And I'm not sure we saw that game again.
No. Not quite to that same degree, no.
Errors and omissions. I have nothing on yesterday's list, and Yerke didn't weigh in, so perhaps it's a clean sheet there, unless you've got something.
We had a couple little minor things that we corrected in moment.
On the fly?
Yeah, nothing lingering.
Moving right along. Thanks for connecting with us, everybody. We appreciate you spending some of your time with us. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social. That's Twitter, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube live. Many of those platforms, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time weekdays. And, of course, support the community sponsors you hear us telling you about. Keep it local.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the Nat. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.